Tolerance and diversity are societal values, constructs, not biblical values. To tolerate means to refrain from interfering with or prohibiting something undesirable or outside one's own practice or beliefs, to allow or permit, to accept or be patient regarding as in something unpleasant or undesirable, to allow the existence, presence, practice, or act of without prohibition or hindrance, to permit, to endure without repugnance, to put up with. Diversity usually means the inclusion of individuals representing more than one national origin, color, religion, socioeconomic stratum, sexual orientation. It also means difference and unlikeness. Let's talk about tolerance first. Yes, let's use Islam as an example. I know the tenets of Islam from studying it many years ago and writing an article on it before the propaganda machine was up and running, and before Ilhan Omar infiltrated Congress and they had all but destroyed England. Just ask Katie Hopkins about the destructive power of Islam in England. Islam is not a tolerant religion. In fact, it goes so far beyond religion. It does not tolerate homosexuals. It throws them off buildings. It boils them in oil. It beheads them. Islam treats women as property using so-called honor killings if a woman's family says she has in some way shamed them. Uppity wives have acid thrown in their faces, disfiguring them. Rape is a sanctioned punishment for women. They have a kill the infidel tenet that is set aside in chess moves to weasel their way into societies in order to take over and set up their barbaric Sharia law. They hate Christian believers, those they consider infidels. Muslims literally hate this country and shout that when they are in private and in Muslim countries, but know that they must curtail that here in order to infiltrate our cities and states, so they keep silent until they are in Muslim-only groups. This was allowed by our overly tolerant society and will precipitate the downfall of the United States. So the left says that by shunning Muslims, I am intolerant. And yet, Muslims are the most intolerant people on this planet we inhabit. Why should I tolerate the intolerable, those who do not tolerate others? This is not some extremist cult. This is Islam. God did not tolerate Islam. Why should I? Tolerate. Let's get back to the definition. I refrain from prohibiting them. I do not execute them on sight. I tolerate their presence in this country. But I do not trust them. I do not like them. And I will never believe the propaganda because I know the facts, which are easily found by anyone who wants to know the truth. We are told by the ignorant that Jesus tolerated everyone. But the truth is, He allowed them to speak to him, yet he never said, "Lady, you're sinning and I accept your truth. Keep being you." He said, "You are forgiven. Go and sin no more." Jesus required change. That was under Mosaic law, of course, which is cause and effect. As in, you do this bad, unlawful thing and you will be punished. You do a good thing and you are rewarded. That's Mosaic law. We are now under grace, without penalty of sin for those who are saved. But that is not an excuse to do wrong. I could expound on that, but that's for another time. No, Jesus did not preach tolerance. God did not tolerate heathen practices or ask his people to accept them. To believe that, you would have to rewrite the Bible. And before you call me the most boring insult on earth, racist, Muslim is not a race. Plenty of Christians live in Muslim countries, and they have been tortured and beheaded by those Mohammedans you want me to tolerate. Talk about diversity. Diversity in the Old Testament was frowned upon. Israel mixing with the heathen races was not tolerated by God. And in the Grace Age scripture, God said, "Come out from among them," meaning the heathen, "and be ye separate." In a certain article written by John Hawkins, it says America's increasing diversity is largely the product of a change to our immigration system implemented in the 60s. European-born immigrants made up 75% of American immigrants in 1960, but that percentage dropped only 11% in 2014. Combine that with a cultural degradation and rise of tribalism that has occurred during the last couple of decades, and we've seen a much more radical change in this country than most people realize. Furthermore, all this diversity in America has a lot of negative consequences. It's become increasingly popular to speak of racial and ethnic diversity as a strength, but there's a huge new study based on detailed interviews of nearly 30,000 people across America that concluded just the opposite. Harvard political scientist Robert Putnam found that the greater the diversity in a community, the fewer people vote, the less they volunteer, the less they give to charity and work on community projects. In the most diverse communities, neighbors trust one another about half as much as they do in the most homogeneous settings. The study, and the largest ever on civic engagement in America, found that virtually all measures of civic health are lower in more diverse settings. So, for all the lofty speak about diversities, liberals don't believe in it at all. If they did truly believe in diversity, they would push for diversity to include political conservatives, fundamental Christians, and others unlike themselves. Yet, how often does that happen? It seems that diversity, in their mind, only applies to racial and sexual minorities. Conservatives understand perfectly well that the concept of diversity is an ideological construct that marginalizes them, specifically marginalizes them. This is the essence of the conservative resistance to diversity. It's a racket and it's a sham. Calls for diversity and racial dialogue are really lies. And what they mean is, we, the liberals, are going to tell you, conservatives, why you're wrong and what we expect you to do about it. What they mean is, you will tolerate us, but we hate you until you submit to us. So, biblically, there's a passage that hits both tolerance and diversity at the same time. It's in 2 Corinthians 6, 14-17. Be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers, for what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? And what communion hath light with darkness? And what concord hath Christ with Belial? And what part hath he that believeth with an infidel? And what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? For ye are the temple of the living God. As God hath said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Wherefore come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith the Lord. So, that hits both tolerance and diversity. Tolerating evil isn't evil within itself. G.K. Chesterton said, tolerance is the virtue of the man without conviction. So the problem with tolerance is tolerance breeds passivity. Passivity leads to consent. Passivity never accomplished anything and it never achieved anything. Our liberal section of society doesn't just want you to tolerate the intolerable, they insist that you celebrate it. Give an inch, they take 20 miles. And when you tolerate bad behavior and stupidity, it breeds. Tolerance is a virus that is spearheading the destruction of society. The solution? The freeing word is no. Just say no. Stop being instructed in tolerance by the most intolerant among us, the morally bereft liberal Marxist currently in vogue for some inexplicable reason. Once again, tolerance and diversity are societal values, not biblical ones.